I'm Sophia, 34 years old with a complicated history with my sister Madison. When her wedding invitation arrived, I hoped we might finally reconcile after years of tension. Instead, standing in her designer gown, Madison used her toast to mock my weight and single status while 500 guests watched. As tears filled my eyes, something unexpected happened. Her groom James stood, took the microphone, bowed slightly in my direction and said, "Ma'am." What happened next changed everything. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, hit subscribe, and stay for a sister story that proves family wounds can heal in the most unexpected ways. I was once a promising pianist. My instructor, Mrs. Reynolds, would beam proudly during my recitals, whispering about scholarships and conservatory potential. Music filled our home in suburban Connecticut, my fingers dancing across ivory keys for hours each day. Madison would sit nearby sometimes, drawing fashion designs while humming along to my music. 2 years younger than me, she had been my shadow, my first audience member, my biggest fan. But things changed when Madison turned 13 and blossomed into a startling beauty. Suddenly, my quiet talent seemed invisible next to her magnetic presence. Our mother, a former beauty queen herself, took particular interest in Madison's development, spending hours shopping for the perfect outfits and teaching her about makeup and social graces. Dad tried to balance the scales by attending my recitals and praising my musical achievements, but even his genuine enthusiasm couldn't compare to the excited chatter between Mom and Madison about pageants and modeling opportunities. "Sophia plays beautifully," Mom would say absently after my performances, already turning to adjust Madison's hair or discuss her upcoming audition. For Madison's events, Mom transformed into an animated cheerleader, recording videos and creating scrapbooks. The message became clear without words. Madison's achievements were spectacular. Mine were expected. Despite this, Madison and I maintained a civil relationship throughout high school. We occupied different social spheres. She was homecoming queen surrounded by admirers, while I found a smaller circle of friends through music and academics. We existed in parallel, occasionally crossing paths at family dinners where Madison dominated conversation with stories of social triumphs, while I listened quietly. Everything changed dramatically during my second year at college. Mom called one ordinary Tuesday, her voice uncharacteristically shaky. "The doctors found something," she said. "Cancer. Aggressive. Treatment needed to begin immediately." I returned home that weekend, and when I saw Mom, already looking smaller somehow, I made my decision. I deferred my education, shelved my musical ambitions, and moved back home. Madison, who had just been accepted to a prestigious fashion program in New York, faced the same choice. "You've always been better with the caretaking stuff," she told me, eyes pleading. "And this opportunity won't come around again. You understand, right?" I did understand, in a way that aches even now. Madison left for New York with Mom's enthusiastic blessing. One of us should follow their dreams, Mom had insisted. So I stayed, learning to manage medication schedules, accompanying Mom to chemotherapy appointments, and playing piano in the living room when her strength allowed her to listen. Over the next 7 years, Madison's calls became less frequent. Her visits home became rushed weekend appearances where she'd bring expensive gifts, take carefully staged photos with Mom for social media, then disappear back to her increasingly glamorous life. Meanwhile, I coordinated with doctors, researched treatment options, and held Mom's hand through the worst nights. The stress and irregular hours took a visible toll on me. I found comfort in late-night bowls of pasta and midday stress relief cookies. My once athletic frame gradually softened and expanded. When Madison would visit, her eyes would scan me with barely concealed judgment before making comments like, "You should really try this amazing detox I just did." Mom passed away 2 years ago, leaving a void that still feels raw. Madison flew in for the funeral, looking immaculate in designer black, accepting condolences with practiced grace while I moved through the day in a fog of exhaustion and grief. She left the day after, citing work commitments, leaving me to sort through Mom's belongings and manage the estate alone. I tried to rebuild my life afterward. I finished my degree, found work teaching piano to children, and slowly reconnected with old friends. The weight I'd gained stayed with me, a physical manifestation of those difficult years that I was learning to accept, even as society made that acceptance difficult. 6 months after Mom's funeral, Madison called with surprising news. "I'm engaged," she exclaimed. "His name is James Harrington. Old money, incredible business sense, and absolutely devoted to me." I offered genuine congratulations, having long ago resigned myself to Madison's self-centered worldview. What surprised me was her mention of James wanting to meet me. "He's big on family," she explained, sounding slightly annoyed. "He keeps asking about you." The engagement party was held at an exclusive Manhattan restaurant. I arrived feeling immediately out of place among the fashion industry elites and finance moguls that constituted Madison's social circle. Madison greeted me with an air kiss and quick introduction to various guests before disappearing into the crowd. I found myself standing alone near the appetizer table, contemplating how soon I could politely leave. "You must be Sophia," came a warm voice behind me. I turned to find a tall man with kind eyes and an unassuming smile. "I'm James. I've been looking forward to meeting you." James Harrington was not what I expected. Despite his wealth and status, he carried himself with a genuine humility that seemed at odds with Madison's carefully cultivated image. He asked thoughtful questions about my music, my teaching, and even about Mom's illness. He listened attentively to my answers without the glazed expression most people adopt when I speak. Most surprisingly, he spoke with sincere admiration about my decision to care for Mom. "That takes real character," he said. "Family matters more than anything in the end." Madison materialized beside us, slipping her arm possessively through his. "I see you've met my sister," she said with a tight smile. "She's wonderful," James replied, giving my shoulder a friendly squeeze. "Just as I expected." Madison's smile remained fixed, but something flashed behind her eyes, an emotion I couldn't quite identify. Annoyance? Jealousy? Concern? Whatever it was disappeared quickly as she pulled James away to meet some important industry contact. The wedding invitation arrived 3 months later, an elaborate affair of creamy cardstock and gold embossing requesting my presence at the Society Wedding of the Year. Along with it came a note in Madison's handwriting. "James insists you be part of the bridal party. Call me to discuss." The fake enthusiasm was apparent even in her penmanship. I almost declined. Years of being the family afterthought had taught me self-preservation. But something about James' kindness at the engagement party made me curious. Perhaps this wedding could be a new beginning for Madison and me. Perhaps, after all these years, we might find our way back to being sisters again. How naive I was to hope. The 6 months leading up to Madison's wedding became increasingly uncomfortable as my role in the bridal party forced me into her orbit more frequently than we'd experienced since childhood. Each interaction brought new reminders of our fundamental differences and the wounds that had never healed between us. Shopping for bridesmaid dresses became the first battleground. Madison had selected a high-end boutique in Manhattan where the sample sizes barely reached a size 8. I watched her other bridesmaids, all fashion industry friends with identical willowy frames, trying on the delicate silk slip dresses Madison had chosen. "We might need to special order for Sophia," Madison told the consultant loudly as I struggled with a zipper. "She's not industry standard." The consultant, a woman named Vivian with kind eyes that contrasted her fashionable severity, caught my expression and intervened. "Actually, I have several stunning options that would complement your sister's lovely figure. The important thing is cohesion in color and formality, not identical styling." Madison frowned but allowed Vivian to bring several options. When I emerged from the dressing room in a beautifully structured A-line that flattered my curves while matching the others in color and fabric, I felt momentarily confident. "It's certainly the best we can do," Madison sighed, deflating my brief moment of self-assurance. Later, my friend Beth helped me process the experience over coffee. "She's always been like this," I explained, stirring my latte absently. "Nothing I do will ever be good enough." "Then why put yourself through this?" Beth asked. "You don't owe her your presence." I couldn't fully articulate my reasons then, some mixture of obligation, hope, and the lingering shadow of our mother's expectations. Maybe things can be different now, I said instead. The bridal shower a month later proved that hope unfounded. Madison's friends gathered in the penthouse apartment of her maid of honor, Tiffany, a space decorated in Instagram-worthy displays of flowers and champagne fountains. I arrived early to help set up, only to be given menial tasks while the inner circle handled the important arrangements. During gift opening, Madison performed for her audience, exclaiming dramatically over each luxury item. When she opened my gift, a handcrafted photo album containing restored family photos, including several beautiful shots of our mother, her enthusiasm noticeably dimmed. "How nostalgic," she said, quickly setting it aside for a Tiffany crystal decanter from her next gift. Later, while retrieving my coat from a bedroom, I overheard Madison's voice from the adjoining bathroom. "I only included her because James insisted," she was saying. "Dad threatened to reduce his contribution if I didn't, and James has this whole family values thing. It's exhausting." "She seems nice enough," came another voice, Tiffany's, I thought. "She's a reminder of everything I worked to escape," Madison replied. "Every time someone meets us both, I can see them wondering how we're related. It's embarrassing." I slipped out without my coat, texting Beth that I needed emergency ice cream therapy. That night, I seriously considered backing out of the wedding entirely. Only the thought of disappointing my father, who was genuinely excited about having both his daughters participate in the ceremony, kept me committed. The rehearsal dinner brought its own tensions. Held at an exclusive restaurant overlooking Central Park, the event gathered the wedding party and close family for what should have been an intimate celebration. Madison alternated between ignoring me completely and performing exaggerated sisterly affection whenever James was watching. "My amazing big sister," she cooed, throwing an arm around my shoulders when James approached our table. "I was just telling Sophia how grateful I am to have her support tomorrow." As soon as James moved to greet other guests, Madison's arm dropped and she stepped away, immediately engaging Tiffany in conversation about a Fashion Week after-party I hadn't been invited to. What struck me most was James' behavior throughout the evening. He seemed to genuinely want to include me, bringing me into conversations, asking my opinion on wedding details, and sharing stories that highlighted Madison in a warm light. His affection for my sister seemed real, which only made her duplicity more confusing. What did she show him behind closed doors that earned such genuine regard? Was there a Madison I never got to see? I also noticed moments of tension between them, small disagreements quickly smoothed over. Madison's irritation when James spent too long talking to anyone else, his occasional weariness when she demanded attention. These glimpses made me wonder about the foundation of their relationship, but it wasn't my place to question. The morning of the wedding dawned with picture-perfect weather and absolute chaos in the bridal suite. Madison had booked the presidential suite at one of Manhattan's most exclusive hotels, transforming it into a staging ground for her transformation. Hairstylists, makeup artists, photographers, and assistants bustled around while Madison sat at the center, like a queen holding court. I arrived early as requested, only to be largely ignored for the first hour. When Madison finally acknowledged me, it was with a critical assessment. "The makeup artist will need extra time with you," she said, eyeing the dark circles under my eyes from my restless night. "And please tell me you did the lymphatic massage I recommended. You're looking puffy." I bit back a retort, reminding myself this was her day. The makeup artist, a young woman named Riley with a purple pixie cut, gave me a sympathetic look as she worked her magic, whispering encouragement about my gorgeous bone structure and beautiful eyes that made me almost believe her. The real drama began when Madison's custom veil arrived. As she unpacked it from its tissue-lined box, her face contorted in horror. "This is completely wrong," she shrieked. "The lace pattern is different from what I ordered." The wedding planner made frantic calls while Madison worked herself into a hysteria that seemed disproportionate even for a bride. Years of handling mom's medical crises had given me unexpected skills in emergency management. I examined the veil carefully, noting that while the pattern was slightly different, the overall effect was still stunning. "Let me try something," I said quietly, taking the veil to a well-lit corner. Using the emergency sewing kit I always carried, a habit from Mom's illness, when I'd often need to make quick repairs to medical gowns or bedding, I delicately adjusted some of the positioning, enhancing the veil's cascade to better frame Madison's face. When I returned with the modified veil, the wedding planner looked relieved. Madison scrutinized it suspiciously. "It's still not what I ordered," she said, but allowed the hairstylist to attach it. When she looked in the mirror, even Madison couldn't deny the effect was breathtaking. The photographer immediately began capturing shots, exclaiming over how the veil caught the light. "I suppose it will do," Madison conceded, not quite thanking me. Then, in a lower voice as others bustled around her, she added, "Just don't embarrass me today, okay? No emotional speeches or anything. Keep it together." The comment stung more than it should have. After all these years, Madison still saw me as a liability rather than family. Part of me wanted to walk out, to refuse to participate in this charade of sisterly affection. But another part, the part that remembered the little girl who once hummed along to my piano playing, wanted to see this through, to find some closure on this chapter of our relationship. So I stayed, pushing down the hurt like I'd done countless times before, and prepared to stand beside my sister as she began her new life, a life that would likely include even less space for me than before. The Harrington-approved venue for Madison's wedding was nothing short of spectacular, a historic Manhattan landmark transformed by an army of decorators into something between a royal gala and a fantasy garden. Crystal chandeliers hung above arrangements of white roses and hydrangeas that must have depleted several flower markets. Hand-calligraphed escort cards directed 500 guests to tables named after fashion capitals rather than mere numbers. Even the air smelled expensive, some custom fragrance that Madison had commissioned specifically for her special day. I stood in the entryway, already feeling like an imposter despite my professional styling and designer bridesmaid dress. Around me swirled guests who represented New York's elite, fashion editors in architectural dresses, finance moguls in bespoke suits, even a few minor celebrities trying to look inconspicuous. My father appeared beside me, handsome in his tuxedo but looking as overwhelmed as I felt. "There's my girl," he said, squeezing my hand. "You look beautiful, Sophia." "Thanks, Dad," I replied, grateful for his steady presence. "Quite the spectacle Madison has created." He nodded, his expression complex. "Your mother would have loved the extravagance of it all. Though, I think she'd be prouder of you." Before I could respond, wedding coordinators with earpieces were herding the bridal party into position. The ceremony proceeded with military precision and theatrical flair. Madison appeared at precisely the right moment, looking impossibly perfect in her couture gown, the troublesome veil now seeming designed specifically for this moment as it caught the strategically positioned light. From my place in the lineup of bridesmaids, I watched James's face as Madison approached. His expression showed genuine awe and affection, though I noticed a tightness around his eyes that suggested something else, nervousness, perhaps, or concern. Madison's expression was triumphant rather than tender, her eyes occasionally darting to the celebrity photographer rather than remaining fixed on her groom. The vows were beautiful but generic, clearly selected for their photogenic quality rather than personal meaning. No inside jokes or shared memories, nothing that would confuse the magazine editors who would later feature the wedding. Still, when James spoke his promises, his voice carried a sincerity that momentarily transcended the spectacle around them. The kiss was perfectly choreographed, the recessional flawlessly timed to the string quartet's crescendo. Madison had achieved the picture-perfect wedding she'd always wanted. I felt a complicated mix of emotions, happiness for her success, sadness for the authenticity that seemed missing, and my own loneliness amid the celebration of connection. As guests transitioned to the reception space, I discovered my first personal slight of the evening. Rather than being seated at the family table near the bride and groom, my place car directed me to a distant table shared with distant cousins twice removed and friends' parents who hadn't warranted A-list placement. The message was clear. Biological necessity had earned me a bridesmaid spot, but Madison had no intention of featuring me prominently in her perfect evening. I was resigning myself to an evening of awkward small talk with strangers when James appeared beside me, his expression shifting from polite host to genuine concern when he realized my situation. "There's been a mistake with the seating," he said decisively, signaling to a coordinator. "Sophia should be at the family table with her father." The coordinator looked momentarily panicked. Mrs. Harrington was very specific about the seating arrangements. "I'm sure my wife would want her sister at the family table," James replied, his tone pleasant but firm. "Please make the adjustment." Minutes later, I found myself being escorted to the prominent family table where my father sat with James's parents and a few distinguished relatives. Madison's carefully controlled expression when she saw me take my seat told me this had indeed not been a simple oversight. But with cameras documenting every moment and James watching attentively, she could only manage a tight smile in my direction. "We're so pleased to finally meet you," said James's mother, Eleanor, a graceful woman with silver-streaked dark hair and kind eyes that reminded me of her son's. "James has told us so much about you." "He has." I couldn't hide my surprise. "Of course," Eleanor continued. "He was particularly moved by your dedication to your mother during her illness. Our family experienced something similar with James's aunt. It takes exceptional strength to put your life on hold for a loved one." Her husband, Richard, nodded in agreement. "Most impressive. James said you were also quite the pianist." I blushed and used to such focused positive attention. "I used to be. I still teach, but haven't performed seriously in years." "You should play something tonight," Eleanor suggested. "I understand there's a beautiful grand piano in the cocktail area." "Oh, I don't think that would fit with Madison's plans," I demurred, knowing my sister would be horrified at any unscheduled performances stealing even a moment of her spotlight. From across the table, I noticed Madison watching our interaction with growing annoyance. When Eleanor excused herself to greet an old friend, Madison immediately took her vacant seat beside me. "What are you doing?" she hissed under her breath, maintaining a smile for any watching eyes. "Having dinner with your in-laws," I replied evenly. "They're lovely people." "This isn't about making new friends, Sophia. This is my wedding. Don't try to steal attention or make this about you." The accusation was so absurd I almost laughed. "Madison, I'm literally just sitting where James asked me to sit and having polite conversation." "Just keep it low-key," she warned, standing as James approached. Her expression transformed instantly into radiant joy as he placed a hand on her shoulder. "Everything okay?" he asked, looking between us. "Perfect," Madison exclaimed. "I was just telling Sophia how happy I am that she's here with us today." As Madison was pulled away by her maid of honor for photos, I excused myself to the restroom, needing a moment to compose myself. In the elegant marble sanctuary, I stared at my reflection, trying to recognize the confident woman Riley had created with her makeup artistry. Instead, I saw only the insecure sister, forever in Madison's shadow. My phone buzzed with a text from Beth. "How's the wedding from hell? Need extraction." I smiled despite myself. "Surprisingly complicated," I typed back. Madison being Madison, but her husband seems genuinely nice. His parents too. "We're dynamic." "Remember your worth," Beth replied. "Don't let her dim your light." With Beth's encouragement bolstering me, I decided to return to the reception with a new approach. I would be polite, dignified, and engaged, but I would not allow Madison's insecurities to dictate my experience. This might be her day, but it was my life, and I deserved to exist in it fully. The reception progressed through its choreographed perfection, the couple's first dance, professionally choreographed, the cake cutting, designed for optimal photo composition rather than taste, and the parade of perfectly plated gourmet courses that I could hardly eat through the knot of anxiety in my stomach. Madison performed her role flawlessly, moving from table to table with practiced charm, laughing at the right moments, and posing for an endless stream of photos. From my seat at the family table, I maintained my resolution to remain positively engaged, having pleasant conversations with James's extended family and watching my father enjoy himself more than he had in years. Perhaps sensing my discomfort, James's parents made special efforts to include me in conversations, asking thoughtful questions about my teaching and sharing stories about James's childhood that revealed the foundations of his character. As dinner plates were being cleared and champagne flutes refilled, the wedding planner approached the microphone, announcing it was time for toasts. First came the best man, James's college roommate, who shared polished anecdotes about their friendship and James's business acumen. The maid of honor followed with a speech clearly designed more for social media than genuine sentiment, focusing heavily on Madison's rise in the fashion world and their adventures in exotic locations. Then, unexpectedly, the planner announced, "And now, a special toast from our bride to her sister." A murmur of appreciation rippled through the crowd at this apparent gesture of sisterly affection. Madison approached the microphone with graceful confidence, her expression warm as cameras turned in her direction. My stomach tightened instinctively, but I forced a smile, telling myself I was being paranoid. Perhaps this was Madison's way of acknowledging our complicated history and moving forward. "I want to take a moment to talk about family," Madison began, her voice carrying the perfect emotional tremor. "Especially my sister, Sophia." She gestured toward me, and spotlights suddenly illuminated our table. Hundreds of eyes turned in my direction as Madison continued. "Sophia and I had such different paths growing up. While I was chasing my dreams in the fashion world, Sophia stayed home, caring for our mother during her illness." The crowd murmured appreciatively at this acknowledgement, and for a moment, I allowed myself to hope this might be a genuine tribute. That hope died with her next words. "Of course, those years at home took their toll," Madison continued, her tone shifting subtly. "I mean, we all know about the freshman 15, but Sophia invented the caretaker 40. She laughed lightly, inviting others to join. Uncomfortable titters spread through the audience as Madison warmed to her theme. Growing up, Sophia was the talented one, playing piano, getting perfect grades. I was so jealous. Madison's voice dripped with false self-deprecation. But life has a way of balancing things, doesn't it? Now look at us. She gestured dramatically between her perfect figure in her designer gown and me in my carefully selected bridesmaid dress. The implication was unmistakable, and the laughter grew more confident as guests realized this was meant to be humorous rather than cruel. Sophia couldn't even find a date for today, Madison continued, ignoring my father's increasingly stony expression. I tried to set her up with several eligible men, but apparently, they all had washing to do that day. More laughter. I told her not to worry. There's someone for everyone eventually. Each word struck like a physical blow. I sat frozen, unable to move or speak as Madison continued her systematic humiliation disguised as sisterly ribbing. It's funny how life turns out, isn't it? The successful sister and the other one. Madison's smile remained fixed as she twisted the knife deeper. But that's family for you. We don't get to choose our siblings, but we love them anyway, even when they show up looking like they mistook a wedding for an all-you-can-eat buffet. Tears formed in my eyes as memories flooded back, schoolyard taunts, adolescent insecurities, and the thousand small wounds family can inflict because they know exactly where to aim. I saw my father half-rise from his seat, his face flushed with anger, but something kept him from interrupting. Perhaps shock, perhaps years of conditioning to Madison's behavior. Eleanor and Richard Harrington sat rigid with horror, exchanging glances that communicated volumes about their dismay. Around the room, reactions were mixed. Those who knew Madison well looked uncomfortable but unsurprised, while those who didn't know our history laughed along, assuming this must be good-natured teasing between close sisters. To Sophia, Madison concluded, raising her glass with theatrical affection. Proof that not all of us can have it all, but we make do with what we've got. Love you, sis. Applause followed, uncertain at first, then gaining confidence as guests followed social cues to treat this as a normal toast rather than the public evisceration it was. Under the cover of this noise, I gathered my small clutch purse and rose from my seat, intent on slipping away before the tears spilled over. I couldn't bear to sit through another moment of this celebration, couldn't stomach the pitying glances or awkward conversations that would follow. As I stood, Madison's eyes met mine across the room, and for an instant, I thought I saw something flicker there. Not remorse exactly, but recognition of a line crossed. Then it vanished behind her practiced smile as she accepted the adulation of her audience and returned to her seat beside James, who had been speaking with the server during her speech and appeared to be just realizing something significant had occurred. I moved toward the exit, head down, focusing on each step to keep from breaking completely. All I wanted was to escape, to find a taxi, to return to my small apartment where I could lick my wounds in private and begin the process of excising Madison from my life once and for all. No relationship was worth this level of degradation, not even one bound by blood. I had almost reached the exit when the sound of someone tapping insistently on a microphone cut through the resumed dinner conversation. The room gradually quieted as attention shifted back to the front, where James now stood, microphone in hand, his expression unreadable. Against my better judgment, I paused at the threshold, curious despite my pain about what Madison's new husband might say. Perhaps some conventional platitude about his beautiful bride, allowing the evening to continue its glossy perfection despite the ugly moment that had just transpired. I could not have been more wrong. James stood at the microphone, his tall frame commanding attention without effort. The easy charm that had characterized his interactions all evening had vanished, replaced by a serious intensity that immediately silenced the room. His eyes scanned the crowd briefly before finding me, paused in my escape at the back of the room. "Before I begin what I had planned to say tonight," he started, his voice steady and clear, "I need to address something that just happened." Madison's smile faltered slightly as she looked up at her new husband, confusion crossing her perfect features. Around the room, guests exchanged uncertain glances, sensing the disruption in the evening's carefully orchestrated flow. James stepped away from the head table, moving to the center of the room. Then, to the astonishment of everyone present, he turned toward where I stood and bowed slightly. "Ma'am," he said, the formal address carrying clearly through the silent room. "I owe you an apology." 500 guests turned as one to look at me, standing frozen by the exit. My cheeks burned with embarrassment at being the center of attention, exactly what Madison had accused me of seeking. "I should have stopped that speech the moment it began to turn cruel," James continued. "My silence made me complicit, and for that, I am deeply sorry." Madison's face had transformed from confusion to alarm. She half rose from her seat, but James continued before she could interrupt. "Many of you don't know Sophia Lawson, but I want to tell you what I know about her." His voice grew warmer. When their mother was diagnosed with cancer, Sophia put her entire life on hold, her education, her promising music career, her personal relationships, to become her mother's primary caretaker. For 7 years, she coordinated medical care, managed pain, researched treatments, and provided the emotional support that allowed her mother to maintain dignity during an incredibly difficult illness. James's parents were nodding solemnly, while my father's eyes had filled with tears. Madison sat rigidly, her expression unreadable. "I know what that kind of sacrifice means," James continued. "My own sister Allison did something similar for our uncle when I was younger. It's not a path many would choose, and it comes at great personal cost. But it reveals character of the highest order." He turned more fully toward me, his expression both sad and determined. "Sophia, your sister's words tonight were cruel and unfair. They reflected nothing about you, and everything about the speaker. I want you to know that from the moment I heard about your dedication to your mother, I have had nothing but the deepest respect for you." The silence in the room was absolute. No clinks of silverware, no whispered comments, just 500 people witnessing an unprecedented moment. "Madison," James said, turning to his bride, whose expression had shifted from alarm to anger. "I've known about how you treat your sister for months now. I've heard your dismissive comments, witnessed your backhanded compliments, and seen how you try to diminish her when you think I'm not paying attention." Gasps rippled through the audience. This breach of wedding etiquette, a groom publicly criticizing his bride, was unheard of in their social circle. "I had hoped," James continued, his voice softer but still carrying clearly, "that today might be different. That the commitment we made to build a life together might inspire you to heal the relationship with your only sister. Instead, you chose to use our wedding as a platform to humiliate her." Madison stood now, her face flushed. "James, you're making a scene," she hissed, just loudly enough to be caught by the microphone. "This is our wedding day." "Yes, it is," he agreed. "A day that should celebrate love, family, and commitment. Which is why I can't let this moment pass without addressing it. I'm asking you now, in front of our friends and family, to apologize to your sister for the hurt you've caused." Madison's jaw dropped in disbelief. She glanced around at the watching crowd, then back at James. "You can't be serious," she said. "It was just a few jokes." Everyone was laughing. "They were laughing because they didn't know better," James replied evenly. "They didn't recognize cruelty disguised as humor. But I did, your father did, and my parents did. Most importantly, Sophia did." Madison's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You're ruining everything," she said, her voice rising. "This is supposed to be my perfect day." "Some things are more important than a perfect wedding, Madison," James said quietly. "Like treating family with dignity and respect." The standoff between them crackled with tension. Guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, witnessing a marital dispute before the marriage had barely begun. Photography had ceased, the professionals uncertain how to document this unexpected turn. I remained rooted to my spot, overwhelmed by James's defense, but equally mortified at being the center of this drama. Part of me wanted to slip away and let them resolve their conflict privately. But another part, a stronger part that had been silenced for too long, needed to see this through. Madison finally broke the tense silence with a theatrical laugh. "You're overreacting, darling," she said, attempting to regain control of the situation. "Sophia knows I was just teasing." "Sisters do that all the time, don't we, Sophia?" All eyes turned to me again, waiting for my response. In that moment, I felt a lifetime of accommodating Madison's narrative, of smoothing over her cruelties, of diminishing myself to keep peace. Something inside me strengthened. "No, Madison," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Sisters don't humiliate each other in front of hundreds of people. That's not teasing. That's cruelty." Madison's carefully composed facade cracked slightly, revealing genuine shock at my refusal to play along. Before she could respond, James spoke again. "I won't continue this reception as if nothing happened," he said firmly. "I believe in addressing problems directly. Madison, I'm asking you one more time to apologize to your sister." Madison looked between James and me, calculation visible behind her eyes. The perfect wedding day she had planned so meticulously was unraveling, and her new husband was taking a stand she clearly hadn't anticipated. The room waited in breathless silence for her response. When it came, it was pure Madison, dramatic and deflecting. "I can't believe you're doing this to me right now," she said, tears suddenly filling her eyes. Without another word, she gathered her gown and swept from the room toward the bridal suite, leaving stunned silence in her wake. James watched her go, then turned back to the microphone. "I apologize for the interruption," he told the guests. "Please continue enjoying your dinner. If you'll excuse me for a few minutes." He handed the microphone to the wedding planner, who looked completely out of her depth and headed in my direction. As he approached, I braced myself for anger or resentment. After all, my presence had just disrupted his wedding day. Instead, he stopped a respectful distance away and spoke quietly. "I'm sorry that happened, Sophia. Would you be willing to talk with Madison and me? I think this is a conversation that's long overdue." Exhausted and emotionally drained, I nearly refused. But something in his sincere expression and the knowledge that he had just taken an extraordinary stand on my behalf made me nod agreement. I'd like to try, I said. But I've been trying for years. I know, he replied. But maybe today can be different. Sometimes it takes a moment of crisis to break through old patterns. Together, we walked toward the bridal suite, leaving behind a reception in disarray and 500 guests who would definitely have something to talk about tomorrow. The walk to the bridal suite stretched through ornate hotel corridors that seemed to extend indefinitely. James maintained a respectful silence beside me, allowing me space to gather my thoughts. My emotions swung wildly between vindication that someone had finally acknowledged Madison's behavior, embarrassment at the public nature of the confrontation, and anxiety about the conversation ahead. She won't make this easy, I finally said as we approached the suite. James nodded. I know, but easy conversations rarely change anything. He knocked gently on the door. Madison? It's James and Sophia. We need to talk. Go away. Came the muffled response, Madison's voice thick with tears. Whether genuine or tactical, I couldn't tell. Madison. James's voice remained calm but firm. We're going to have this conversation now as adults. Please open the door. After a long pause, the lock clicked and the door swung open to reveal Madison, mascara artfully smudged beneath her eyes, her wedding gown slightly disheveled in a way that somehow enhanced rather than detracted from her beauty. Even in crisis, she maintained aesthetic control. How could you humiliate me like that? She demanded of James, ignoring me completely. In front of everyone. On our wedding day. James stepped into the suite, gesturing for me to follow. I didn't humiliate you, Madison. I addressed a situation that needed addressing. By taking her side? Madison gestured dismissively toward me. She's always been jealous of me, always trying to make herself the victim. The familiar accusation stung, but I forced myself to remain composed. Madison, when have I ever tried to steal attention from you? Name one time. You're doing it right now, she cried. It's my wedding day, and somehow you've made it all about you and your feelings. James closed the door to give us privacy and turned to face Madison. That's not fair, and you know it. Sophia didn't make a scene. You did, with that speech. Why would you say those things about your sister? Madison sank onto a plush ottoman, her enormous skirt billowing around her. It was just a few jokes, she insisted, though her convictions seemed to waver. Everyone makes jokes in wedding speeches. Those weren't jokes, I said quietly. They were designed to hurt me. What I don't understand is why, Madison. Why do you need to tear me down? Something flickered across Madison's face, a moment of genuine emotion breaking through her practiced expressions. She looked away, focusing on adjusting her veil. You wouldn't understand, she muttered. Help me understand, I persisted, taking a seat across from her. We used to be close, Madison. What happened to us? Madison remained silent, but James spoke up. Madison, I think it's time to be honest. With Sophia and with yourself. Madison shot him an irritated glance, but then, surprisingly, her shoulders slumped slightly. They always loved you more, she said, so softly I almost missed it. What? I asked, genuinely confused. Mom and Dad, she clarified, her voice stronger but bitter. They always loved you more. You are the good daughter, responsible, talented, selfless Sophia. How could I compete with that? The accusation was so opposite to my own perception that I laughed in disbelief. Madison, that's absurd. Mom spent all her time with you. She was practically your personal cheerleader. I was an afterthought. Madison's head snapped up, her eyes flashing. She spent time on my appearance and achievements because that's all she thought I was good for. She never believed I had substance. But she respected you. Dad absolutely adored you. You were the daughter they were proud of. I stared at her, trying to reconcile her words with my memories. Madison, Mom loved you tremendously. She bragged about you constantly. She bragged about how I looked, what I wore, who I dated, Madison countered. With you, she talked about your character, your talent, your intelligence. Don't you see the difference? James moved to sit beside Madison, not touching her, but offering his presence. "I think you're both seeing different pieces of the same picture," he said gently. "From what you've both told me, your mother had very different relationships with each of you." He turned to me. "Sophia, can you see how Madison might have envied the respect your parents had for your choices? How the attention to her appearance might have felt superficial compared to the admiration they expressed for your character?" Slowly, I nodded, memories shifting into new configurations. Mom's effusive praise of Madison's beauty and social success alongside quieter, more substantial approval of my choices. The different expectations they had set for each of us. "And Madison," James continued, "can you acknowledge that from Sophia's perspective, she saw you receiving the majority of your mother's time and enthusiasm, while she often felt overlooked?" Madison dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. "I guess I never thought about it that way," she admitted reluctantly. "My sister and I had a similar dynamic," James shared, surprising me with this personal revelation. Different types of attention from our parents created a competition that didn't need to exist. It took us years to understand we were both valued, just differently. A heavy silence fell over the room as we each processed this new perspective. I thought about all the years of hurt and resentment, built on a foundation of misunderstanding and insecurity. "That still doesn't excuse what you said tonight," I finally said to Madison. "Or how you've treated me all these years." Madison looked up, and for the first time that day, perhaps the first time in years, her expression held no calculation or performance. "You're right," she said simply. "It doesn't." She stood, moving to the window overlooking the Manhattan skyline. "When Mom got sick, and you stepped up without hesitation, I felt exposed. Your goodness highlighted my selfishness. I couldn't bear to watch Mom deteriorate, couldn't handle the medical details, couldn't sacrifice my career. But you could. You did all the things I wasn't strong enough to do." She turned back to face me. "I resented you for making me look bad by comparison. Then I resented you for making me feel guilty. It was easier to focus on superficial things, your weight, your clothes, your single status, than to admit I failed our mother when she needed me." The raw honesty of her confession stunned me into silence. Madison had never been this vulnerable, this authentic with me. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," she continued. "What I did, what I've been doing for years, isn't something that can be erased with one apology. But I am sorry, Sophia. Truly sorry." Tears filled my eyes, not from hurt this time, but from the unexpected relief of finally being seen. "I never wanted to compete with you, Madison. I just wanted to be your sister." "I know," she whispered. "I've made that impossible for a long time." James had remained quiet, allowing us this moment of connection. Now he spoke gently. "Where do you want to go from here? Both of you?" Madison looked at me questioningly. The power dynamic between us shifted for perhaps the first time in our adult lives. "I'd like to try again," I said cautiously. Not pretending nothing happened, but moving forward differently. Madison nodded, a flicker of hope crossing her face. "I'd like that too." She moved to her vanity and began repairing her makeup with practiced efficiency. "God, I must look a mess," she said, a hint of the old Madison returning. "Actually, you've somehow managed to make tear-streaked mascara look like a deliberate fashion choice," I replied with a small smile. Madison caught my eye in the mirror and laughed, a genuine laugh without malice or performance. "One of my many talents," she said. Then, more seriously, "we should get back out there before they send a search party." "Are you ready for that?" James asked her. Madison took a deep breath, straightening her posture. "I've spent my entire adult life creating the perfect image," she said. "Maybe it's time to try something different, something real." She turned to me, starting with a genuine apology to my sister. Publicly. I shook my head. "You don't need to do that. What's happened between us doesn't need an audience." "Yes, it does," Madison insisted. "I humiliated you publicly. I should apologize the same way." We returned to the reception together, Madison between James and me. The room hushed as we entered, conversations pausing mid-sentence as guests noticed our return. Madison walked directly to the microphone, her head held high. "I owe everyone an apology," she began, her voice steady. "Especially my sister, Sophia." She turned to look at me. What I said earlier wasn't funny or sisterly teasing. It was cruel and untrue. Sophia has always been the strongest person in our family, the one who steps up when it matters most. I'm sorry I couldn't acknowledge that until today. The simple sincerity of her words carried more impact than any elaborate speech could have. My father wiped tears from his eyes as Madison continued. "If you'll all bear with us, we'd like to continue celebrating, not just our marriage, but family, truth, and new beginnings." The reception gradually resumed, guests processing the unexpected drama as the band began playing again. Madison approached me with uncharacteristic hesitation. Would you like to dance?" she asked. It felt awkward and formal, but it was a beginning. As we moved somewhat stiffly to the music, Madison whispered, "Is this weird?" "It feels weird." I laughed softly. "Extremely weird. But good weird." "Good weird," she agreed, a genuine smile softening her features. From across the room, I saw my father watching us with wonder and hope. Nearby, James danced with his mother, both of them observing Madison and me with approval. For the first time in years, I felt the possibility of real connection with my sister. Not perfect, not complete, but genuine. The wedding continued. The perfect surface rippled, but not destroyed by the evening's revelations. And in those ripples, something authentic had finally been allowed to emerge. 1 week after Madison and James departed for their honeymoon in the Maldives, I sat in my small apartment, still processing everything that had happened at the wedding. The emotional whiplash of public humiliation followed by unexpected confrontation and tentative reconciliation had left me drained but cautiously hopeful. My phone chimed with a notification. A text from Madison, the third since they'd left. Unlike her previous messages, which had been group texts of scenic photos sent to multiple recipients, this one was just for me. "Thinking about our conversation," she wrote. "Still processing everything. Can we get coffee when I'm back? Just us." I stared at the message, sensing the effort it must have taken her to reach out. Madison had never been one for introspection or emotional labor. The fact that she was processing anything was itself a significant change. "I'd like that," I replied simply. As I set my phone down, my gaze fell on the baby grand piano that dominated my modest living room, the one extravagance I had allowed myself, purchased with part of my inheritance from Mom. Dust had gathered on its closed lid, a visual reminder of how long it had been since I'd played for pleasure rather than just for teaching. On impulse, I opened the lid, wiped away the dust, and positioned myself on the bench. My fingers felt stiff at first, unpracticed in the pieces that had once been as natural as breathing. But gradually, the muscle memory returned, and with it came a flood of emotions I had suppressed for years: grief for my mother, resentment toward Madison, and underneath it all, a love for music that had been overshadowed by life's complications. By the end of that week, I had called my old piano teacher, Mrs. Reynolds, now in her 70s, but still teaching. "I'd like to restart lessons," I told her. "Not to perform professionally, but to reconnect with the music." "The piano has been waiting for you, dear," she replied warmly. "It's always been your voice." Madison and James returned 3 weeks later, tanned and seemingly content. Our scheduled coffee meeting approached with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. Would the insights and vulnerability of the wedding night survive the return to normal life? Or would Madison revert to her old patterns once the emotional intensity had faded? We met at a quiet cafe near my apartment, Madison's choice to come to my neighborhood rather than expecting me to travel to her upscale Manhattan world. She arrived without her usual armor of designer perfection, dressed casually in jeans and a simple blouse, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. "This place is cute," she said after ordering, glancing around at the mismatched furniture and local artwork. "Very you. Is that a compliment or an insult?" I asked, only half joking. Madison winced. "A compliment, though I see why you'd question that." She fiddled with her wedding ring, a massive diamond that looked almost out of place with her casual attire. I'm trying to be more mindful of how my words land. James's influence? I guessed. She nodded.
Partly.
But also just growing up, I guess. The honeymoon gave us a lot of time to talk. About everything. And how was that? Uncomfortable, she admitted with a small laugh. I'm not used to that kind of emotional excavation. James comes from a family that actually communicates instead of sweeping things under designer rugs. I smiled at her self-awareness. That must be strange for you. Terrifying, actually. She met my eyes directly. But necessary. I've been thinking a lot about Mom and us and everything. Our conversation that day wasn't transformative or perfect. We stumbled through awkward moments, navigated old triggers, and sometimes retreated to safer topics when emotions ran too high. But beneath the discomfort was something new, a mutual effort to see each other clearly, perhaps for the first time since childhood. As Madison prepared to leave, she hesitated. James mentioned you've started playing piano again. Just for myself, I clarified. Nothing serious. He thought. We thought maybe you'd consider playing something at our housewarming next month? If you want to, of course. No pressure. The invitation surprised me. You'd want that. Madison nodded. I've never actually heard you play as an adult. I'd like to. 3 months after the wedding, our relationship had developed into something I would have considered impossible before. Not best friends, not completely healed, but intentional sisters, making regular efforts to connect and understand each other better. James facilitated some of this growth, providing neutral ground for family gatherings and gently mediating when old patterns threatened to emerge. But increasingly, Madison and I found our own rhythm, learning to appreciate our differences rather than feeling threatened by them. 6 months post-wedding, I gave my first public piano performance in over a decade, a small recital for my students and their families. I had invited Madison without expectation, knowing she had a busy schedule and doubting she would make time for such a modest event. To my surprise, she arrived early, claiming a front row seat and listening with genuine attention as my students performed their pieces. When my turn came to play, Debussy's Clair de Lune, my mother's favorite, I spotted tears in Madison's eyes as the final notes faded. That was beautiful, she told me afterward, her usual polish momentarily replaced by authentic emotion. Mom would have loved it. Yes, I agreed. She would have. My weight remained unchanged throughout this period of reconciliation. I was still the same size 14 that had drawn Madison's cruel jokes at the wedding. But something fundamental had shifted in how I carried myself. Piano had reconnected me to my core identity, and the healing in my relationship with Madison had released me from years of comparative inadequacy. 1 year after the wedding that had nearly shattered our family, Madison and I sat in my father's backyard, watching him grill steaks while James prepared a salad in the kitchen. The scene was ordinary in its domesticity, but extraordinary in its peacefulness. "Did you ever imagine we'd be here?" Madison asked, gesturing between us. I shook my head. Not in a million years. "I was so awful to you," she said, not for the first time. "For so long." "You were," I agreed. "But you're not now. That matters more." Our relationship wasn't perfect. We still had moments of tension, still occasionally fell into old patterns. But we had developed something neither of us had possessed before. The ability to recognize those moments and redirect them before damage was done. James and I had formed our own friendship, based on mutual respect and shared interests in classical music and literature that Madison tolerated with good-natured eye-rolling. He had become the brother I never had, while maintaining his primary loyalty to his wife. And I had begun dating again, a professor of music history I'd met through a community orchestra I'd joined. Daniel appreciated my curves, my passion for teaching, and my complicated family history. When I introduced him to Madison and James, I watched carefully for any sign of Madison's old judgmental assessment. Instead, she engaged him in genuine conversation, later texting me a simple, "He seems wonderful. I'm happy for you." That evening, after dinner at Dad's house, I sat at his old upright piano, the one where I'd first learned to play, and let the music express what words still sometimes failed to convey. Madison sat nearby, not performing or competing, just listening. "I understand now why you love it so much," she said afterward. "When you play, it's like seeing the real you, the you that was always there." "Music was always my voice," I replied. "Even when I wasn't playing, it was there inside me." "I think that's what I envied most," Madison admitted. "You always knew who you were." "I'm still figuring that out." As I drove home that night, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The wounds of childhood hadn't magically disappeared. The years of Madison's cruelty hadn't been erased by a few months of effort. But something profound had changed, not just between us, but within each of us. I had learned that standing up for yourself sometimes comes from unexpected allies. That family dynamics can change, even after decades of toxic patterns. That forgiveness doesn't require forgetting, but it does demand moving forward. Most importantly, I had rediscovered that my worth was never tied to Madison's assessment or anyone else's approval. It had always resided in the music within me, in the compassion I'd shown my mother, in the strength I'd found to rebuild my life, and now, in the courage to allow a new relationship with my sister to develop, however imperfectly. Back in my apartment, I opened the piano and played softly in the darkness, the notes floating through the quiet rooms like a prayer of gratitude. For the unexpected wedding moment that had broken open the possibility of change. For James's courage in speaking truth. For Madison's willingness to grow. And for my own capacity to heal. True beauty, I had finally learned, comes not from perfection, but from authenticity. Not from hiding our wounds, but from allowing them to transform us. Not from outshining others, but from finding our own unique light. Have you ever experienced a painful family relationship that eventually healed? What helped you find forgiveness or reconciliation? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life journeys of healing and growth. Sometimes our deepest wounds become our greatest teachers, and I'm grateful to have shared this part of my journey with you today. Remember, it's never too late for a new beginning, with others or with yourself.